Thanks for joining today's Livestock Advisor Updates webinar, Tips for Starting Out in Consulting. My name's Leanne Sheriff. I'm part of the Livestock Advisor Updates coordination team at Pinion Advisory, and I'll be looking after today's webinar along with my colleague Ashley Evans and Keely Kovacevic from MLA. If you have any technological issues, just send them a message in the chat and they'll be able to help you. So before we get underway, we've just got a few housekeeping things. If you could please mute your microphones if you're not speaking. Ideally, if you can have your video on, it's a lot more enjoyable experience for the presenters seeing an audience rather than feeling like they're talking to themselves. The session today is being recorded. As you know from filling in the registration form, if you want to edit your name, there's a couple of little or three little dots up in the top right hand corner of your own video that you can see. You can click on those and edit your name, and also change the view of the Zoom meeting room. We are going to have a breakout room, and there will also be plenty of opportunity for questions and discussions. There's two ways to ask questions. One is through the chat, and we would encourage you to use the chat and also to respond to each other's questions and comments and make that a little bit interactive. The other way will be Poll Everywhere, which is an online evaluation tool. And as I said, if you've got any technological issues, just contact Ashley or Keely. I would just like to introduce our presenters for today. So we're really fortunate to have Desiree Jackson and Laura Broughton with us. So they've offered to share their personal journeys of how they've started out in consulting, and they're both at different points in their career and had different pathways to where they are now. So it should be really interesting to hear from both of those. Desiree works for herself in Desiree Jackson Livestock Management. She's based out of Longreach in Queensland and has been consulting for 7 years. Prior to that, she was working for the Queensland Department of Agriculture for 20 years and also operated a grazing business. The majority of her work is one-on-one client consulting around animal nutrition and breeder management, and she also delivers some of the training courses. She's one of the leading edge deliverers in Queensland. Laura works for herself also and has a business called Productive Livestock Systems based out of Cootamundra in New South Wales. Laura is our new to the game person. She's been consulting for 3 years. Prior to that, she worked as a technical officer with the Sheep CRC and the University of New England. Laura primarily consults to clients operating mixed farming businesses in southern New South Wales, as well as facilitating extension workshops and managing industry research projects. We also, as part of today's webinar, acknowledge that, as I said, this is Laura and Desiree's personal story, but we know that everyone here today has their own story and their own experiences to share. And so we thought we'd just introduce you, the audience, to each other. So the majority of you come from the public sector, so 27% are involved in the public sector, and 16% are private sector. And then there's also quite a few vets in the mix over here as well, at 22% of the vets. And unsurprisingly, I guess, in terms of length of time in your current role, the webinar has appealed to those with less experience. So 32% have 0 to 2 years experience, 24% 3 to 5 years experience, and 22% 6 to 10 years experience. And in terms of geography, where people work, the majority, 42%, are from New South Wales. And then we have nearly a quarter from the north, across northern Queensland, northern WA and the NT, and then a smattering from every other state. So it's great to see people from right across the country in the room. And then the final question that we asked in the pre-webinar survey was, what is your current situation? And nearly 60% of you are in another industry role now and thinking about whether consulting is for you, with a further 10% in another role and starting to make moves to work in private consulting. And there are a few in the room who have been working as a private consultant for a few years, and it will be great to get that diversity in perspectives. So, as I said, we're using Poll Everywhere today to both facilitate some of the questions for the forum and also to do an evaluation at the end. So if you could please scan the QR code using the camera on your phone, and it will take you to the question forum, and then when we wrap up, onto the poll. So now, without further ado, we'll get stuck into the actual webinar itself, and I'll start by asking Desiree a few questions. The first one we've got is, would you be able to describe for everyone your decision-making process about going into consulting and how you went about deciding that it was going to be for you?
Okay. Yep. So I'm prepared for that question. And while I was working for the department, my regular question was, should I stay or should I go? I've got a few prompts here, a couple of slides to show you just to cover my own journey. So I'm not saying the way I went about going into consulting was necessarily the right pathway, but it was my pathway. And hopefully I can give you a few ideas about some of the processes I went through to help you make that decision for yourself. But I'm certainly not, the expert or the role model for to follow for going down that pathway. So hopefully, yep. So I've added a few photos in, so you just don't have to listen or look at words. You can have a look at some of the photos of some of the areas that I've been to, just as a matter of interest. So my first question was what does a consultancy business offer that I wasn't currently getting in my job? So what were the benefits of actually going into a consultancy business? A lot of what I do now was very similar to what I did in my position with the Department of Ag, minus a lot of the bureaucracy. And so what did it offer? And so I actually listed for myself what were some of the benefits. What is my point of difference? What is going to be my point of difference to actually attract work to my business and attract clients to my business? Developing areas of specialty. So, what are your areas of specialty? Rather than spreading yourself thin, the trap is when you first go out, you're chasing dollars. And so you might be tempted to venture into areas that might be dangerous ground in terms of your area of specialty. So clearly defining that and putting together a business plan for your business as well. What do you need to earn to cover your current salary and overhead costs? So a very good consultant, probably one of Australia's foremost agribusiness consultants, said to me that you pretty much double your current salary, to cover your overheads. And if you can't earn that in a private business, then stick to your day job. And that's just resonated with me over the last few years. Having enough startup capital as well, so you're not hamstrung when you get going. You'll find there's a lot of things that you'll discover that you'll need. Maintaining professional development, that's pretty important. One of the nice things about working for the department was that all gets paid for. And I'll talk about that a bit later, but sometimes that gets sidelined because you get busy with work. But it's pretty critical to stay abreast with things, professional development as well as personal development, and maintaining a professional network. So how do you maintain a professional network when you suddenly become a little bit more socially isolated from people you may have worked with previously? So those are just a few things to think about. Leanne, I haven't covered everything comprehensively, but just a few of the key.
Yeah, that's awesome, Desiree. And for you, what was really helpful when you were starting out?
Okay, yep. So some of the things I found were very helpful. So years before I actually went out, I'd been wanting to get out of working in that government model for a number of years. I was talking to other consultants and finding out what they did, and the good and the bad. and that was extremely helpful. So I talked to people that were doing really, really well in their businesses, and different sizes of businesses. So smaller consultancy, maybe one-man operations compared to larger consultancies, having good mentors, and not sort of going in half-cocked and thinking that you know everything, but really being humble and getting help from people that are experienced in a number of different areas. It was also helpful having a lot of experience in that extension space. That was one of the benefits of working for the department, was having that experience in working with people, but also I was a primary producer for 20 years. So having that personal experience to actually have empathy for what people go through in running a property financially, logistically, practically, and emotionally as well. Just knowing that, you know, to stay service focused, not lifting your head up and looking around and worrying about anyone else, but just staying focused on servicing your clients and doing a good job. For me, that's number one. And I find everything else takes care of itself. Developing a monthly income and expense forecast as well. So maintaining cash flow so you're not going to fall short. So making a prediction so I have monthly goals to actually achieve. I operate on the creative plane, not the competitive plane. I think when you start focusing on the competitive plane, it draws in a lot of negative energy and it affects your work. And so, you know, again, servicing clients, looking for ways to service clients. There isn't a finite amount of work out there. There's plenty of work out there. It's just, you've got to get creative about what you're going to do and trying to figure that out. So, you know, working on your business as well is pretty important, not just within your business. I plan my year out in advance, the whole year. And then I fill in the gaps as I go along, as I need to. Having a good support team. So I've got good admin support, but I've also got a good network of colleagues that I work with, even, you know, currently within the department, and colleagues that are also private consultants. Staying humble through the whole process. People aren't interested in how much you know. They don't care how much you know unless they know how much you care. So really, you know, establishing that rapport with people, but also being willing to learn from others. The moment we think we know everything is when we come unstuck. And also being a workaholic is really helpful as well, because you're going to go from working in a 9-to-5 job to working in a 5-to-9 job. It really is like that. It's hard work, and particularly hard work in the first few years getting established. So I'll pull up there, Leanne.
Awesome. Thank you, Desiree. It'll be interesting to see whether Laura has what her perspective is, being a lot newer at it than you are. So if you could just stop sharing your screen, sure, please, Desiree, and we'll hand over to you, Laura. So yeah, as with Desiree, Laura, are you able to describe decision-making processes that you went through when you were thinking about going into consulting, and how you decided that it was going to be the job for you?
Yeah, sure. And I've probably done it a little bit differently to Desiree. I've sort of thought more about the story, I guess, of how I got to where I was, rather than packaging it up all nicely for you like Desiree has. So bear with me. Hope it's not too detailed for you. But I mean, I've already learned a few things from Desiree just in this session. So I'll have to apply them next time. I think I was in my 3rd or 4th year at uni when I decided that I wanted to work in extension, because I knew that I loved working on farms, but I also really enjoyed the research and the technical side of livestock production. And I thought that, you know, extension consulting would really appeal to me because it had that good mix of the practical and technical work, and also meant that I'd be working closely with a lot of people, which I enjoy, plus, you know, the variety that's involved in that. So, you know, I really wanted to work with a department like the DPI or, you know, the local land services. And I looked for extension jobs when I finished uni, but there really weren't very many available. So it wasn't a clear pathway to me at that time. So I was able to get a technical officer job And I thought that that'd be a really good starting point to build from, to get some of that experience in a lot of different areas. But I still didn't think at that stage there was really a way to get into consulting. It wasn't until I was actually approached by a producer that I was working with who asked me to do some work for them that I began to think seriously about the possibility of starting my own business and actually being able to make a go of it. Because I'd been looking for extension jobs for quite a while, but there really wasn't anything around, and certainly not in the right location. So I sort of came to the conclusion that, if I wanted to do this and I wanted to work in extension, I'm probably going to have to do it on my own. For me, though, there were a lot of unknowns. I'd never run a business before, certainly didn't know how to do a business plan. I'd never worked for another consultant or in extension itself. So I was going to be starting from scratch with really very little background knowledge. I didn't know how to market myself. I didn't know what services I should be trying to provide. And I was mostly concerned that I didn't know enough to be able to provide value to my clients. So I sat on the idea for quite a while. It's something I wanted to do. I just didn't really know how to get there. And then about 12 months later, I was coming to the end of a work contract, and I really needed to think about my career progression and where I wanted to be long term. Within my current role, I don't think I was going to be able to move upwards very much or expand on what I was already doing. And to continue really improving, I probably would have had to go back to uni and do a PhD or, go into private enterprise. And so because I hadn't seen anything privately that really was up my alley in terms of my skills and interests, and because of the location issue, I thought that's not really an option. I thought about doing a PhD, but I wasn't as keen on that as I thought I needed to be able to do it well. And at that time in my role, I was working really closely with producers quite a lot, and I'd also gained a bit more confidence in myself and my abilities. So I thought it was a good time to actually have a go at being starting a consulting business myself. And for me, it was a pretty easy decision then because it was low risk as well. My partner and I were renting, don't have kids. He had full-time work, and I was expecting some ongoing work with my employer at the time. So it was pretty low risk. I thought I could see how it goes for 12 months. If it's a complete disaster, I could always go back into the job market and become an employee for someone for a few years until I get a bit more experience.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a fairly brave leap, Laura. And for you, what was helpful when you started out? I mean, you've talked about some of your personal situation that made it possible for you to take a bit of a risk and a leap of faith, but what were the other things that you put in place that you found really helpful?
Yeah, so financially, it really did help a lot having some ongoing project work from my previous employer. That just provided some stable income while I was gradually building up my client base. And project work is still an important part of my business, that stable income. It also gives you new opportunities to work with different people and develop new skills. So that's still very important. In terms of getting new clients, what helped me at the start was I did already have some existing relationships with producers. And because because I'd already formed that relationship with them, I was quite comfortable in not knowing everything, and they still accepted me and what I was trying to do. To try and pick up some new clients, I really just had to get my name out there a bit. And so I started running some industry extension workshops. That just helped me meet new people and get a bit more experience delivering to a group as well, because I was still pretty green with that. And I was also new to the area where I live. So I joined just a local group for women working in ag, which also introduced me to a few more clients. What was really essential for me, and I could not have succeeded without, was developing a network of people that I could contact for help, because there was so much that I didn't know that, I couldn't have done it without these people. They're really unofficial mentors that, people that I've met over the years through uni or work or at conferences. So my husband, he actually works as a farm business consultant as well. And so his colleagues and himself were fantastic in giving me a bit of advice when I was getting started. But also I relied a lot on different researchers that are specialists in different areas and other private consultants. just having these people that I can ring up every now and then with a particular question. And I've really learned not to be shy about calling people up and asking for help. They're usually more than happy to, help where they can. And I've just made sure that I've got a broad network, so I'm not leaning on any individual person too much.
Awesome. Thank you. We've actually do have a few questions in the poll everywhere, so I'll just throw them to both of you, and if one of you wants to jump in, then feel free. So the first question is, consulting is a service-based business, so I'd expect low overheads. What were some of the costs that surprised you?
Sorry, who do you want to address that one?
Either. Yep, you go. Yep. You start, Laura.
Sure. For me, I think the insurance costs they're probably one of the bigger expenses for me. Getting professional indemnity and public liability insurance, it's a fair bit, and I wasn't quite expecting that. Running expenses. Fortunately, I've got my own home office, so that keeps costs down. But Desiree might have just some different circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think the insurances they're quite expensive. And my advice is get a good broker who's not necessarily aligned with any particular companies, but I use brokers for all sorts of insurances, and when I actually compared what I was paying for the level of insurance compared to a few of my colleagues who'd gone out privately as well. I think some of them were paying 3 times as much as what I was because they hadn't used a broker. So, and I think they ended up going with the same insurance company that I did. So, shop around, really take the time to shop around or get an insurance broker, but get a good insurance broker as well. So, yeah, that was a surprise for me as well. Yep.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. And just if you can each provide an example of what areas you see as being high demand for consulting jobs or work in the livestock sector. And so I guess this is going to be from your northern and southern perspectives, which may be a bit different as well.
I mean, it's hard to know because you know what your niche area is. So, I know there's high demand in the business side. I know there's a massive demand in that area because it's not everybody's favorite area, I suppose. But I think it's what you create for yourself. You create your own demand. I don't think sometimes there is natural demand for areas, and that's often becomes obvious by the level of uptake or how much industries embracing it. But I think I don't know. I don't look over the fence too much. I look at developing demand within my area of expertise and look at within that area, where the demand is, rather than looking at what the demand is generally and then trying to meet it.
Yeah, awesome. Laura, do you have any different thoughts on that one?
Yeah, when looking at the areas that I want to specialise in, I base them on my passions and interests. But I think there's a lot of need out there and a lot of interest in data managers specifically. I work mostly with sheep producers, and I've seen that grow quite a lot down here in southern New South Wales. But also now that stock prices are worth a lot more, I think growers are starting to realise that it's worth their while getting outside advice for livestock production in general. Mm-hmm. And so my business is mostly focused on nutrition, reproduction, grazing management, that sort of thing. And I think we're going to see that grow a lot more in future because everyone's got an agronomist. You wouldn't grow a crop without one. And I think the same will eventually be true for livestock.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, that's probably and the amount of time we've got left for questions. So we'll move on to our second set of questions. And Laura, if you wouldn't mind going first this time. I just wanted for you, what are the key benefits to consulting and in particular to working for yourself?
Sure. Probably the biggest benefit for me is the variety, in that I'm always learning new things and I never have a chance to get bored. It gives me that really good mix of the technical and practical aspects that I was looking for. I mean, one day I can be on farm condition scoring sheep or looking at pastures, and the next day I can be in the office looking at the nitty-gritty of the data. So I really enjoy that variety, and you can sort of make it suit yourself as well. Because you're running your own business, you really get to follow your own passions and focus on what is interesting to you. To some extent, you've still got to take the work that's maybe not your favorite because it pays the bills, but on the whole, you do get to choose what you want to do. I also really enjoy forming really close relationships with producers, because I tend to work with people one-on-one over a long period of time, and I feel like really making a difference to their businesses and to their livestock. And to be able to develop that level of trust with someone where you can give them advice that has a huge impact on their business, that's really rewarding, and I get a lot out of that. And also the flexibility of being a consultant. I mean, I can work from home, and to a large extent, I can really organise that work just to suit me. So the freedom in that is so valuable to me, and I really, really enjoy that part of it too.
Awesome. Thank you. And then finally, some of the challenges. So I guess the flip side of that. So for you, what were or are some of the key challenges and obstacles that you face, and how do you go about overcoming those?
Yeah, these ones are definitely still challenges that I'm working on. Primarily, it's really hard work. Consulting is really mentally demanding. I find that certain times can be really high pressure and stressful, and you don't really get a chance to switch off. It's quite a lot of pressure because you've got to be reliant on yourself to make a lot of decisions. There's not someone that you can delegate work to when you're busy. It's all on you. So you need to be really disciplined and motivated, and like Desiree said, you've got to be a workaholic, and you've got to be okay with doing work that you're not going to get paid for too, because you spend a lot of time doing research and developing skills and just preparing for meetings. And that just needs to be factored into your business plan, I guess. So to deal with some of that, I've just tried to learn myself to monitor myself mentally and know when I'm reaching my limit, when I need to maybe take it down a notch. And I certainly don't always get that right, but, making progress. And I've got to say my husband actually provides a lot of support too, and it'd be a very different situation if I didn't have him. He works in ag, so he's a great sounding board for all the ideas and problems that I have. And he also cooks me dinner when I work late, which happens a lot. So I really go in for that. Another challenge is it is a huge learning curve. So at the start of consulting, like a lot of the time I had to go away and research a question before I could provide an answer to the client. And the clients respected this, and so it wasn't an issue, but it did mean I was really inefficient with my time. And because I'm always learning new things, like you make a lot of progress, but you also feel like there's so much more to learn, and that you're never going to get anywhere sometimes, which can be a bit discouraging. So with that, I've found it useful to actually sit back and reflect every now and then to see what progress I have made, because I do know a lot more now than I used to, but sometimes it just doesn't feel that way. So it's important to do a bit of self-reflection. Another challenge is when you're starting from absolute scratch, you don't really have a framework or any processes to follow. So you've really got to make everything up for yourself. Eventually you do get to a point though where you've done everything once, you've tried those processes out, you've had a chance to make some improvements and see what works and doesn't work. And then you've sort of got that structure to follow in future, which really helps with your efficiency as well and your confidence, because you actually know a bit about what you're doing. And Desiree touched on this too, but when you're working on your own, you can be very professionally isolated. And I don't think I realised how much I learned from other people until I was in that position of working on my own. And I think it's really valuable to learn from other people. So you've got to make sure you're trying to get that interaction somehow, whether that's collaborating on projects or co-presenting workshops or being involved in committees. You're also responsible for all your professional development, and conferences and training programs can be quite expensive and time consuming, but you really need to make sure you're still upskilling yourself and networking so that you can provide the best advice for clients and take advantage of any opportunities that come up. And the last one I'll mention just working out what to charge it was and still is a bit of a challenge. I mean, you've got to think about what is your advice actually worth to that producer, but you also need to factor in the time that you spend researching, your professional development, superannuation costs, admin costs, plus you do need to let yourself have some annual leave occasionally. And it can be challenging to try and communicate your fees to your clients because they don't always understand all the different factors that have to go into that. So you've got to be quite careful in doing that. What I did to try and work out where my price point should be was I talked to other consultants privately to get some advice, because it will really depend a lot on the type of work that you do too and your experience. But talking to other people that do similar jobs to what I do really helped out with that.
Awesome. That's some very wise words there. And I could see Desiree nodding a lot. So she's obviously experienced some of those same things. So we'll hand back over to Desiree. Thanks, Laura.
Okay. Yep. There's a lot of overlap in I think what we'll both say. I'll flick some slides up again, so you don't have to look at my mug. You can let me just look at my pretty slides, pretty photos. So some of the benefits, and Laura's mentioned this, having that autonomy. I find that I can actually, having been in for a while, work with producers who are progressive and wanting to achieve, a higher standard, and it is quite rewarding because they actually follow through on advice you provide to them, and that in itself is pretty rewarding. The opportunity to be really creative and decide what sort of work you'd like to do and how you'd like to do it. So there's no constraints except for your time and money and your market. I love what I do, and so they say if you love what you do, it's not a job. That's the case most of the time, but as Laura rightly mentioned, there are aspects that you're going to do that are not always that savory, but that's just part and parcel. I don't think you can escape that, regardless of what sort of industry or job or business you're in. There's always going to be that aspect. Again, Laura mentioned flexibility and variety, and that's what keeps things exciting, is being able to do different things, and it keeps your energy level up then as well. From going from working for a government to private, definitely a lot fewer hoops to jump through. You don't have to ask for anyone's permission. You just go and do what you want to do with your clients, and I love that. That was probably the biggest enticer for me, and not having geographical boundaries. Having said that, I also consider other consultants or government staff in areas they're working in as well. So, I try to have an amicable arrangement with other, I suppose, unspoken arrangement with other people. There's a lot of country in Australia, especially Northern Australia. So, I just don't see that need to be on a really vicious competitive plane with other people. Some of the challenges, setting pricing, if you're first going out, you might set your pricing too low, and then it's a long way to claw your way out of that. So you need to be really careful about setting pricing. And I did the same as Laura, talked to a lot of other people and what they were charging. And then just making sure you're covering off on some of those overheads as well. In quoting, sometimes you just charge for things you're actually going to do, but you need to consider some of those overhead costs as well. Probably one of my biggest challenges is not overbooking, and just leaving time gaps for work to come in, which it inevitably does, but you always want to maintain good cash flow. So you want to, guarantee that you're going to have specific income each month. So, really making sure you're not overbooking so that you can service clients in a timely manner. Work-life balance is probably one of my big struggles as well. And that's quite important. Especially if you're a one-man show, you've got to look after your health. And if you haven't got your health, you're not going to be working. So it's really important. Social isolation. I'm happy with my own company working, but occasionally I look up and think, gee, I really need to get in touch with a few other people. So you do need to make the effort, and then just you do miss that occasionally. If you're a small consultancy and you've got, taking time off, well, there isn't that cash flow coming in. So you haven't got cash flow, you're not earning money, and you most probably are spending money. So it's not something you worry about when you're on a salary. You get paid holidays. You don't get paid holidays when you're working for yourself. Overhead costs and wages. Wages, as Phil Holmes once said to me, wages have tentacles. So, you've got superannuation, you've got additional overhead costs, extra office space, things like that. But obviously you do your homework and it pays for it. But it's, there's definitely significant costs associated with that. What holidays? That's probably a challenge as well. I find that I take holidays, I guess, because we've got tend to have more of a distinct wet season in the north, where things get a little bit quieter, especially around Christmas time, compared to what you have in southern states. When everybody else goes on holidays, that's when I get to have my holiday, but then there's always a couple that aren't. So anyhow, you try to work the best you can around it. Perceptions by others, that might be a problem for some. It doesn't really worry me too much. And just stay focused on what you're doing, and knowing that if you're doing a good job and you're working with a lot of integrity and honesty, and then it doesn't really matter. Sometimes, probably not so much in the south because you've got so many private consultants, but up north there's fewer private consultants. And I know, when I was with the department, sometimes it was a little bit of an us and them. And I'm hoping that, we bridge the gap a lot more, and I still have some really great colleagues within the department. So I'd like to think we do have good working arrangements. If you've got new staff coming on board and you're spending a lot of time away, particularly if you're up north, where generally if you're traveling, it's not just for the day, it's for, a week or two. How do you manage new staff and help them? Self-preservation, so you don't go and do, stating the obvious, but you just don't go and do silly things. Probably applies less to women, but guys who like to play rugby when they're in their 40s, or hop on the bulls, just know that if you damage yourself and you're in hospital, you're not making money, and you've got to take 100% responsibility for what you do. So the full responsibility is yours. So that's always, that is a big responsibility in itself, that somebody's business is in your hands, and being mindful of that when you're assisting them. Just a couple of obstacles that I face. So, and this is again probably more northern, where there's fewer consultants and a lot of different organizations, such as some of the organizations along the coast and the department NRM groups like that. If they're offering services or workshops for free in the same area that you're doing paid work in, I just try to turn that around, change my mindset in that, if you value yourself, then producers will value you as well if you're providing good service. And most probably you might attract a different audience anyhow. And those people that value what they pay for. And the positive side of other organizations actually doing some of that free stuff is that it gets people thinking about, it creates awareness and gets them thinking about doing a bit more in that space. And that's where, you might be able to provide a service to them. So it shouldn't be perceived in an entirely negative light. And Laura also mentioned, the cost of professional development. It's expensive because it's also time away from work. It's also the money you spend. And you might be really busy and just say, oh, I can't go away. Like, I'm too busy. I've got too much on. If you make a commitment to doing it, stick to it and go and do it. You need to find that balance and see it as a networking opportunity and doing some planning with other consultants or meeting with clients. Paperwork and admin jobs, have a good admin officer and bookkeeper. If you think you can't afford one, you can afford one. Hire a good accountant and not just a compliance accountant, so you don't get yourself into taxation problems with having to pay a lot of tax. Don't be a control freak. Learn to delegate stuff. You don't need to control everything. You might have a lot of overhead costs to keep the business running. Just review everything and try to keep things down as much as you can without compromising your business productivity. But if you say you can't afford it, it might just be that you can't afford not to. And then unexpected events like COVID, which we've experienced. A lot of my work involved a lot of travel and a lot of interstate travel. I haven't had a trip down to New South Wales for a while now. You just need to get creative and look for a variety of work that allows you to maintain cash flow and just buffers you against those sort of unexpected events. So I'll hand it over to you again, Leanne.
Thanks, Desiree. So we're just going to step into the breakout room now. Great. Well, thank you all. I hope that was a useful exercise and you got to meet some people with different perspectives and diversity. So what we've like to do now is just have a couple of minutes if anyone from any of the breakout rooms would like to share their breakout room experience, that'd be great. So we'll just call for volunteers. So if anyone wants to unmute, and just a reminder, as you've come back in, you'll be unmuted. So if you can just mute yourselves again if you are unmuted. And yeah, did anyone want to share anything? Otherwise, I can throw to Desiree and Laura because we've still got some unanswered
Leanne,
questions.
I'm happy to if no one else is going to.
Awesome.
So I was in a room with Greg, and it was interesting that we both probably took slightly different steps. Whereas I owned a business and then sold, but are now working for a bigger, like a corporate. And Greg stepped into that sort of path too. So we went to down the path of not having that stress of being alone, having to set things up, but still having some of the advantages of what was talked about. So yeah, it was. I mean, that's worked for both of us, but it was just a slightly different step into similar sort of role, getting paid a wage, don't have to worry about the setup costs, still have the flexibility of time and things like that. So yeah,
terrific. So a lot of the benefits without without so many of the challenges.
Correct. Yep.
Awesome. That's terrific. Thank you. Anyone else?
I was going to chime in and say we had a similar conversation in our breakout room as well. But then also how people's interest to getting into private, being your own consultant and having your own freedom is a really big driver for that as well. So yeah, it was good to chat about through that.
Awesome. Thank you. And anyone else? You've got time for one other group, I reckon.
We chatted briefly about the anxieties that sometimes come with it and that imposter syndrome feeling that you can sometimes have. But being able to take the weight off your shoulders and realise that you're not the person that needs to have all the answers, but your value is in what Beck was saying was, realising that you've got a valuable network that you can leverage to go and find those answers.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, that's awesome. Great. Thank you all. So Desiree and Laura, did you have any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I've got just a couple of, points, I think. I think, really maintaining that service focused and not being consumed with, how much you're going to make. Obviously, that's ultimately what we want to do. But if you really put the client first, everything honestly does take care of itself. Spreading your risk and doing a number of different things. Going back to that service focus, people really do pick up on your energy and they know that you're genuine about wanting to do a good job for them. making sure you work on your business, not just in your business. And every December, and I don't do it as a New Year's resolution, it's just when I'm on a break, and I work on my business and see how things are going. And it's amazing, you know, I write down very specifically all the things I'm going to do over the year, right down to the number of times. And it's amazing when you review that halfway through the year, or even at the end of the year, how many of those things actually have come to fruition, because it just, you know, it all just gets embedded in your self-conscious and things happen. But being really clear and specific about those things, and you know, things really do happen. So working on your business, maybe even once or twice a year if you can. But and the last thing is, you know, just having that plan, but really listening to people, listening, you know, to hear what they're saying rather than listening to be able to answer them straight away, is just so critical.
Yep. Awesome. Thank you, Desiree. Laura, any final thoughts for you as we wrap up?
Just following on from what Desiree last said there, I really focus on trying to build that relationship first and letting the rest of it come after, because once you've got that trust in each other, they're going to be more open with you. They're going to trust you when you give that advice. Like, it's going to be a lot more effective, and it's a lot more fun working that way too, because then you're working with almost your friends rather than just a client. And also really focus on your network. I'd be really in trouble if I didn't have the network I do. So do put a lot of time into it and really value it. And go to events like this, because I've learned so much from Desiree already that, you know, I can't emphasize that enough. Really build that network, because you learn a lot from so many other people.
Yeah. Fabulous. And and on that, we really appreciate you and Desiree, you know, sharing your personal journey with us. It's often a lot harder to talk about personal stuff than it is technical stuff. It's you know, your lived experiences. So we really appreciate your time and the thought you've put into today. And thank you to everyone in the breakout groups for sharing their discussions as well. That's fantastic. And so just as we wrap up, I'll just hand over to Keely Kovacevic from MLA, just to give a little plug for something that is all about networking and building your networks and your professional development that Laura and Desiree have talked about as being so important.
Exactly. What a great segue. Thank you so much. Again, thank you all for jumping on today. We really value livestock advisors, and we're looking to, you know, increase our investment in this space. So to see you all here today is really good for us, not just KPI wise, obviously, but to show that there is engagement and that we do need to continue this professional development for people. So in saying that, we do have 3 upcoming events happening in the livestock advisor space. The first is happening in Perth. So if anyone is over in WA, this is actually going to be a face-to-face event, which is incredibly exciting. It's happening on the 15th of October. This is Livestock Advisor Updates. And the day before, we're actually going to have a PGS, like one-on-one advising day. So basically, the best way that you can work with producers, how do you get a producer group together, how do you present to them, you know, the basics of becoming a profitable grazing systems deliverer, and also just how to better engage with MLA so that you're able to present more products, I guess, make more offerings for your clients. So that's happening from 8:45 to 5:30, and you can get more information and register at advisor updates, mla.com.au/advisor updates. The second event is our livestock advisor updates for our southern regions. Now, this was supposed to be face-to-face in Dubbo and in Melbourne. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we are now going online with this one. So it'll be a Zoom meeting from 9 a.m. to 3:45 p.m. on the 16th of November. It'll be $50, and it's all about unpacking the livestock production. So with this one as well, we will also have some additional training days around the same, or not the same date, but in the weeks leading up to it, so that you can get trained in PGS delivery training, and also some soft skills, well, not soft skills, but your, you know, personal skills in how to work with clients, and, you know, everything along those routes that aren't the technical side of things. And then our third event is currently the Livestock Advisor Updates in Brisbane, which is currently going to be face-to-face. However, we did just hear that Brisbane went into a stage 2 lockdown today, so we're holding our breaths and crossing our fingers on this one. So at the moment, it will be held on the 29th of November at Mantra on Queen, and it will be 1:35, including networking drinks. And this will also have that professional development on communication and how to work with clients the day after. So more information on these, you can again head to mla.com/au/advisor updates. Thanks so much, guys.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Keely, for that. So thank you everyone for being part of it. We are really keen to evaluate today's session, and in particular, if you've got any suggestions for future topics for our Livestock Advisor Updates webinars, would love to hear from you. So just keep that Poll Everywhere tab opened. If you haven't kept it open, I'll just share my screen again and we'll go back to the QR code so you can reload that. And yeah, if you wouldn't mind taking 3 minutes now just to fill in a few questions, it would be hugely appreciated. So thank you all for making time to be part of it. A special thanks to Laura and Desiree, and we'll see you for our next event in October, hopefully. Okay, bye.